It is now time to fit the primary chain case. There are a couple of preparations beforehand. Obviously you need to make sure everything's tight, and then we'll take this out. There is a pipe which fits into a casting here, and this, as the engine rotates, is throwing oil up into this little catchment area, which then goes down the pipe and actually oils the inside of the chain. This pipe is 6mm OD, 4mm ID. It fits on a little bracket and bolts onto the middle hole here, and then there's two holes for this gasket which fit the two screws coming through from outside of the primary chain case. The gasket actually then equalizes the distance, so when you put a gasket on the outside, these two bolts aren't over tightening the center. The pipe needs to be held in the right place, and there's a 1/4 inch UNC bolt that goes through into this area, and I obviously use a screw from the primary chain case, basically just to hold this gasket in place before I fit the rest of it. Now this gasket is greased, and the gasket around the outside will be greased, so that it comes off relatively easy. These gaskets go a specific way round, and we'll get it greased now and then stick it on. Now, keeping the gasket in place, especially across the top, because the gasket appears to be a little tight around this area, and aligning the clutch pull rod so that it all fits in. There we go. You should be able to see the gasket all the way around. Now, there are various lengths of screws that actually hold this together. They're all 1/4 inch UNC. The two in the middle are 2 inch. The one at the front is 3 inch, and then there are various other ones. There's some under the ones under here are countersink, and then there's one which I think is this one, which is slightly shorter than the others. The clutch used in a Triumph Trident is a 7-inch single plate Borg and Beck clutch, as used in some cars like the early Minis, etc. It has a, I guess, unique operating mechanism that is based on 3 ball bearings that run up a ramp. Well, 3 ramps actually. They at the center of the actuating arm is a ball bearing that matches a ball bearing at the other end of the pull rod, which is in the center of the clutch plate. Actually the pressure plate rather than the clutch plate. The bearing at the center of the pressure plate is a sealed bearing with a limited amount of grease. If the actuator is set up such that the pull rod is under continuous tension, the bearing in the center of the clutch can fail,
and the pull rods then can break. Trust me, I know this, although I have not broken one for many years. Triples Unlimited make a kit that actually makes the clutch operation lighter and can potentially protect the center bearing in the clutch plate itself. The modification is to remove the center bearing from the clutch operating arm and refit the bearing with the one that they send in the packet, and this makes the whole operation much lighter. It's a very easy mod. They include a full set of instructions which are easy to follow, and I actually bought my kit, this latest kit, from eBay, although I have used this kit before in previous Tridents with great success.
I'm now ready to fit the clutch actuating mechanism, and the first thing we need to do for that is to fit the balls, and there's 3 ball bearings, and I use glue, not glue, I use grease to actually sit them in the actuator mechanism. The other option would be, of course, lay the bike down, but we're not going to do that. Right, so I have the 3 balls mounted, and then we fit those. Now I have Loctited the bottom and the ring into the actuator mechanism. I'll just get this tightened up. We will adjust this up later, but you can see that it actually turns very nicely. No, not strong enough to actually operate it. What we now need to do is to get the little arms across. I'll put a little bit of grease on there. This is all oiled as part of the primary chain case oiling system, but we will tighten this up. Okay. Now, the thing we need to do is to fit the cable between there, so that we can operate this and see that we have the right amount of play. I think the book says 2 millimeters. And then make sure that it is all actually working, and then we'll put a lock nut on there. There are certain requirements to setting up the Trident clutch adjuster mechanism, and one of the first requirements is to actually have the cable installed, and it should be adjusted such that you have a little bit of play between the operating arm and the abutment that the arm would come down onto. This mechanism I have adjusted already, so the large nut rotates quite nicely, and there is a certain amount of play here. I haven't actually turned the tabs over yet, because you want to actually make sure that the springs are actually operating in the right point, sliding on the mechanism. The lock nut tightens up onto the large nut, and you can actually use the feeler gauge behind the nut where the bearing is, and there's various listings as to what that gap should be. In this case, this is a 1.5 thou feeler gauge, and it is actually showing that there is play between, although you can't feel it, there is play between the big nut and the the operating arm, such that the clutch pull rod is not under tension, so the bearing in the centre of the clutch is not being stressed, overly stressed. So now, when I operate the clutch, it pulls in, and it will actually pull in with one finger. There is a difficult to see, but a dowel that actually holds the clutch back plate, or not the clutch, the operating mechanism back plate, and there is a mod to actually rotate that round slightly, such that you're slightly further up the ramp, because as you'll see when I operate the clutch lever, there is a certain amount of movement where the clutch is still not in tension, and that is actually reducing the amount of pull that you get. Now, if I actually push down on the kickstart, I can't actually turn the engine over with my hand, but as soon as I actually pull the clutch in, you can see that the engine, or the kickstart would turn the engine over, but of course with the clutch disengaged, it's not doing anything. So that suggests that I've got the clutch set up nicely to fully disengage within the available movement that I've got. There are other tricks that you can do. As I say, you can rotate this backing plate by about 12 degrees, I think the recommendation is, by cutting another notch and then fitting the ramp slightly further round. And you can actually get a clutch operating lever that has a moved pivot, such you get slightly more pull at the expense of actually the weight. I have turned over the tab washers, so now I can put the cover on before I actually put some 350 cc's of engine oil into the primary chain case, having checked that the chain tension is primary chain tension is correct at about 1/2 inch, and that the drain plugs etc. are all sealed up. The cover actually has some offset holes, so it'll only go on one way, and the gasket only fits on one way, with the two closer screw holes at the front. I'm going to put some grease on. This is actually a relatively new part that has been machined from billet rather than cast. I have an older cast one that I picked up somewhere that actually shows a big dimple in the middle where the clutch pull rod has actually started to wind its way out. This is not one that I did, and you can actually see there is a dent there. It's not going to be used, but I did. I remember why I picked that up. It is useful to fit the cover prior to fitting the footrest, because that actually shrouds the bottom two Allen screws. I used to have two Allen screws that were cut just slightly shorter, but I found that that's not always a good practice. The gasket has been greased. Ready to seal up, and we will do this up. That's not that one. With the cover fitted, we now just recheck the clutch cable and the clutch adjustment, and it all works well. One of the keys of a light clutch, this is using basically one finger, is to get the cable run right. Now the cable comes out and dives behind the headlight, comes out the other side of the headlight in a nice wide loop that I normally sit on above the top oil cooler. It then loops around across the top of the engine and then down in a wide arc. It's not totally convenient for where the footrest is, but you actually need to make sure that it is clear away from the throttle cable, which is another wide loop which goes again around behind the headlight and operates the throttle. As a final check, I have connected up the battery, and I'm just going to turn the engine over with the starter motor, and you can hear that the engine's turning over nice.